Welcome to Metal Matters, a Gimme Radio podcast. I'm your host, Mike Hill, and I'll be leading you on this adventure. We'll be getting into deep discussions about classic records, profiles on up-and-coming bands, and interviews with your favorite artists. You can check out new episodes every week, so be sure to subscribe and never miss out. This week we have Chris Alfano and Matt Lupo of the band East of the Wall, based out of central New Jersey. They have a brand new record coming out on Translation Lost, so please check it out. They took some time on a Saturday night of all nights to get together at their practice space and hang out with me. We talked about a bunch of different stuff, the new record, recording process, sort of a revolving door of members, and a variety of different influences, such as our mutual favorite band, King Crimson. If you enjoy this show, I urge you to subscribe and tell all of your friends about it. New episodes on every Tuesday. This is all part of the Gimme Radio platform, which is the world's best streaming 24/7 source of heavy metal and extreme music. I also have a show on that channel, and it goes up twice a month on Fridays. So download the app, check it out. Now, on to the episode. So this room has got quite a bit of history, this particular practice space that we're sitting in tonight. And I've been in this room before. And I think one time, Chris, you were involved in this because you used to sing in Argonauts, right?
That is true, yeah. I was one of the 80 singers in New Jersey who did vocals for Argonauts and Virginia.
Yeah, because I was like, originally it was Dimitri from Dillinger was the first singer.
Yeah.
And then there was a period of time when you were.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was driving back from Texas, I was texting with Dave, and he's like, I'm in New Jersey. If you are anywhere nearby, I should swing by and hang out. And I think you were here.
Yeah, I think that was probably when I was in the band.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was Argonauts, and then they changed the name to Glorious Gone when Harrison from Psyopus was in it.
Right.
And then eventually River Black when Mike was in it. But yeah, it was weird too, because I had recorded Dimitri, like when they did their original demo with Dimitri, I was the one recording it.
Oh, okay.
And that was actually part of how I wound up doing vocals for them for a while, was because I had the recordings.
Uh-huh.
So when Dimitri left, I was like, fuck it, let me try recording some stuff over this, and I sent them a recording of it.
That's cheating.
Hey man, I see that.
There.
I see that as grasping an opportunity.
That's true.
Isn't that how you became the second guitar player of East of the Wall, though? Because the band had... so I recorded the original East of the Wall, 4-song EP, and then I gave him, did I give you the Pro Tools sessions, or did you just have, the final audio?
Yeah, it was released, and I just took the CD, and I was like, I'm going to record some additional parts over this and see if... And when the rest of the band is drunk, I'm going to throw it on and play it for them, and be like, here's what your songs could sound like if you had an additional guitarist. And they went for it. So
this is a nice segue into this, first of all, this region of New Jersey, which seems to be the kind of shred capital of the East Coast. This region of Jersey and maybe Rochester, New York is I think per capita has the most sick players of extreme music, metal, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you count Brooklyn in there too. But
why are we going to count Brooklyn?
Yeah, I don't know, because Dysrhythmia and Krallis are in Brooklyn.
Okay, well, all right, but Mick though is not he's from the DC area. Oh, actually, no, wait, Mick is from Connecticut originally.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dysrhythmia originally from Philly.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And we're talking about homegrown talent, right?
Okay,
here.
yeah, then that's fair.
Yeah,
because no one is from Brooklyn.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's a
collection,
a collection of carpetbaggers.
I'm from Brooklyn. I was born there.
No, you weren't. Were you?
I was born at Methodist Hospital in Brooklyn. I lived there. I lived in Brooklyn for 2 weeks, and then we moved to the island.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I thought you were always in. You were from Long Island, right? And then Conway was from Staten Island. Conway, your old guitar player.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
You have to remember to grab the microphone from me before you talk.
I'll direct you guys. We're out here in the field doing this thing, ultra guerrilla style, out here. And technically, this is this Hazlitt or Keyport?
Yeah, Keyport.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, Yeah, I feel like especially in this area, once you hit like your late 30s, early 40s, like everyone in this band is pretty much. Everyone who's still serious about music is like a community of, I feel like 30 or 40 people by this point, and everyone else quit. So I feel like I literally know every musician in New Jersey by this point.
Now that also leads into the sort of checkered past that East of the Wall has, as far as like, and believe me, from my perspective, I've also dealt with my share of lineup changes. Now I'm actually here because I have practice out here in New Jersey with the New Jersey lineup of Tombs. So I understand. But East of the Wall started, how long ago did you guys form?
I believe it was 2005 when Brett, Mike, and Jeff formed the band. Those are three names that are no longer actually in the band. Yeah.
So it's almost like a Napalm Death kind of thing?
Yeah, basically. They except at least the first two Napalm Death releases were eventually put together as one record. So Shane was on half of that, even though there were two releases separately. I guess technically I recorded the first Deuce of the Wall EP, and I played literally 10 to 12 seconds of drums on it. So I guess that counts. But yeah, the whole thing is, so the only reason why it wasn't even more ridiculous is that the whole band was an offshoot of a previous band that Matt and I, plus Brett, the founding bassist, who's now in Revocation and a bunch of other bands, and then Mike, the original drummer, were all in this band called the Postman Syndrome, which was like 96 to 2005?
I think 2004, 2005, yeah.
Yeah, the last show, 2005. And then when that band broke up, we kind of split into two different bands. One of them was called Day Without Dawn, which eventually became Biclops, and then one of them was East of the Wall. And then, so neither Matt and I were founding members of East of the Wall, but we all kind of were offshoots of a previous band, and then we all kind of like congealed back into one like blob again.
It was destiny.
Yeah, it was like you guys are all kind of part of like this collective consciousness of musicians that existed at the same time in a variety of different bands. And if I might be so bold to say that there is sort of a stylistic similarity, not directly, but I think a vague stylistic similarity between all these bands. Care to expand on that?
Sure. The two of us have been literally playing together since high school. I think it was 94, 95 probably.
Yeah, March of 1995.
I walked in.
And actually, that was also with the original East of the Wall drummer, too.
True. I walked into a high school band, and he was I think you were playing Milk from Anthrax.
Yeah.
And I was
technically, it was Smoke from SOD.
Right.
Although I think both of us first heard it on the Killer Bees Anthrax record.
And I'm like, I know that song. And he looks at me, he's like, "You're a dork." And here we are. So I think, we all influence each other. I know when I joined East of the Wall originally, and Jeff was the guitarist, he was playing stuff like I had not played before, and I learned literally from him how to play a different style of guitar. And I think that's the way. I've never taken formal guitar lessons, but I learned from the people I play with.
Sure.
And I think everybody does that in some way. And when you sort of have a little bit of an incestuous thing going on where everybody's like playing with different versions of each other, you're going to have a little bit of that, which I think is cool.
Yeah, but obviously, you mentioned the SOD track. You guys obviously listen to more than crossover, you know what I mean? So, like, what kind of, King Crimson that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, it's weird because, like, as, like Matt was saying, we kind of learned how to play guitar in part by, like, showing each other a bunch of stuff since literally high school. But then also that was over the span of all of our taste changing from, like, back in those days, it was a lot of, like, thrash metal, early death metal, like some punk stuff. And, then getting into, like, more, like, space rock kind of stuff. And then, like, 70s prog stuff and, like, old game soundtracks and like some hip hop here and there, and eventually, some jazz stuff, and eventually, kind of everything.
I think what was cool. I don't know. I guess this is 20 years ago at this point in high school. It's like, I guess we weren't listening to the radio that much, but we were discovering kind of the same kind of music at the same time as each other, instead of at the same time as, I guess, the nation.
Right.
Like you said, King Crimson. Like all of a sudden, someone's like, "Yo, have you heard Red? Check out Red." And like everyone's listening to Red, and everybody's really into it. And you're kind of like learning about this thing that's existed for a long time, but you just didn't have access to it, and you didn't know about it, and now everybody's into it. And it was a really good time.
It's funny that Red is like, that seems to be the record by them that a lot of people reference. You know, if you talk to a lot of different people that are playing extreme music or metal, you know, I would think, like the intellectually, I would think that maybe the Adrian Belew stuff, like, you know, Beat, Discipline, Three of a Perfect Pair, because the playing on that's like so fucking crazy that might be the record that informs a lot of people who are playing like technical fast music. But you'd be surprised. You mentioned Red, and everyone, that to me is more of a subdued record in a lot of ways.
Definitely, but it's not their flashiest.
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know, it resonates for me.
It's my favorite Crimson record, probably.
I hadn't heard it in a while. I lost my copy, and so I lost it a long time ago, so I never had it digitally. And then someone mentioned it a couple months ago. I think it was Eric Niffler, who he's done a lot of the art on our records. And I was like, "Yo, can you send me that?" And he sent it to me, and it was my dog had just died.
Oh.
And I don't know, Fallen Angel was like,
oh yeah,
it's just it really hit me to listen to that for the first time in a long time. It was
that's an emotional song, man.
Yeah, I think that it's especially weird because really it's just a 5-track record, and one of the songs, like the fourth one, everyone skips, so it's really just 4 songs. But it's funny. Besides the one song you skip, it's a really consistent record, and I think that if the 80s Belew era would have just been Discipline, it would have been remembered better.
Yeah.
But like, because, you know, there was a trio that ended with Red, you know, Lark's Tongues, and then Starless, and then Red, and then there was, you know, the Discipline, Beat, and Through the Perfect. But I think that the other 2 records from the John Wetton trilogy, although not as good as Red, are still really good records and hold up better than the other 2 Belew records, where you could tell they like Robert Fripp was just like, "No, we're gonna play this," and Adrian Belew was just like, "Okay, I'll write something over it," and then you could hear the band kind of like tiring themselves out and falling apart by the 3rd record. So I think that because those later 2 don't hold up as well, even though they have a couple of really good songs on them, that might be part of why Red is also just Red's the best record.
I'm a fan of John Wetton's voice too. I think
that's a big part of it. Like, Adrian Belew's a really good singer, but on some level he's also more of an acquired taste.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, technically he's really good, but his voice is like, I like his voice, but I feel like John Wetton just has like that voice.
Also, he is similar. His voice is also a little bit similar to Greg Lake too, who was on the original, you know, Court of the Crimson King, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, although I wonder how much of that is just that it was that era. Like, you know, if you listen to John Wetton sing in the 80s, he sounds a little more 80'd out.
Right. In Asia, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
The whole record's pretty 80s out.
Yeah. So, you know, because like all of those records came out so quickly. Like, Court of the Crimson King was what, 69?
I think so, yeah.
And then Red was 74. So they did
4 or 5 records in between those.
Yeah, because you always forget about the one with Boz Burrell on it.
I don't forget about that. I listened to that the other day.
Islands?
No, not Lizard.
No, yeah. So Lizard was the third. No, so that's the other guy. That's the guy.
What's his name from Yes, right?
Yeah, John Anderson. Yeah, he just did the one guest song. Yeah, but they got the Cadence and Cascade guy to sing on. Yeah, no, but I'm talking about after that when they had another singer.
Oh, I don't miss that.
So you did forget about it. Yeah, that was his name's like Boz Burrell, I think. He was in like Bad Company or some shit. Yeah. So yeah, they did 7 records between 69 and 74.
Can you imagine putting out that kind of volume of music?
I wish. I mean, like, I feel like, you know what? It's in my head. I could, if I had the time, like if I could just focus on music, I would make it happen somehow. I would love to do that.
What blows me away about the 70s in general and the late 60s is stuff like that, where like a band could put out like 7 records in like 5 years or something. And this, you know, I think that these days record companies would probably not be on board with some sort of schedule like that, but back then it was like this, like redlining, just everything maxed out, pushing forward. Yeah, man, let's get it out. And that's like something that like would be pretty cool, I think, these days, if there were bands that people cared about that actually were putting out records, like 2 records a year or something. Like Black Flag used to put out records like every year, two records one year, But
I think a lot of it probably has to do with, obviously the industry has changed dramatically, but also recording technology, the change there has probably led to a lot of that. Everything can be perfect now. So you take the time to be perfect now. But if you go back and listen to some of those early King Crimson records, you hear faults, and that's cool too. And it's like, and obviously they did more of just like 1 take or 2 take recordings. And so you spend the time writing it, and then you record it in a day or 2, instead of like we just did over 2 years.
So now, who is in the band? What's the current lineup of East of the Wall?
Everyone left in New Jersey. No. So it's still everyone on the last record, except our old guitar player, Ray, has left, and now we did the record basically as a 4-piece, and then like right when we were finishing up, we got our new guitar player, Matt, not to be confused with this Matt, who was in this band, A Fucking Elephant, that we used to play a lot of shows with back in the day. So it was cool though doing it as a 4-piece, because we got to kind of space stuff out a little bit more, not like one less. No matter how selfless you try to be, you still have 5 people that are, I got an idea, let me throw something in, as opposed to 4. So we did wind up having a little bit more breathing room where we could like slowly fill in the gaps, which was cool.
Now Ray is a pretty, incredible guitar player.
Yes, far better than either of us.
Yeah, I mean, he's like having like, someone they write articles about in your band, basically. So
Yep.
Did he contribute at all to this record and writing?
Sort of. He has writing credits on this record.
Yeah, because I saw his name in the notes, I think, that I was
couple
sent.
of the songs we wrote with him when it was like maybe the last few months.
Yeah, it's complicated. So yeah, there's one song that he technically has writing credits on, where we don't actually use any of the riffs that he wrote, but we have a couple parts that we wrote because of what he wrote, or like on top of what he wrote. And we structured the whole thing very much with him. So it was kind of a weird thing where
his spirit is there.
There you go.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, so and there were 2 other songs on this record. I don't think Lineholder counts because we didn't use any of the riffs that we wrote with him.
Oh, I don't even remember.
Yeah, because Lineholder had that whole like, we basically wrote a song, like 2/3 of a song, and then we came up with a couple of the riffs that we wound up using.
Batman.
Yeah, all the Batman stuff. We had all the riffs went dun dun, like every riff did that, so we called it Batman for a while. So yeah, we had like 3 minutes worth of music that in theory was part of the same song, but then we ditched all of it, and then what the song wound up becoming was like one riff that we said maybe this could go with that, and then we just did its own thing. But yeah, so clapping on the ones and threes and fast bang pooper doop, we wrote when he. We're so sorry for that song title. We wrote when Ray was in the band, but Ray, used to live in Maine.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he didn't like all of Redaction Artifacts. He was in Maine, so it was weird. He was in the band. We wrote almost the entire thing with him, but he wasn't always in the rehearsal space. So like 2 of the songs on that record, he were based on his riffs, and the rest like he would just like at home write a bunch of parts on top or when he was down. So this record, I think he wound up moving to New Jersey after we wrote Clapping on the Ones and Threes, and then when we wrote Tell Them I'm Sorry, which is a song that he has credits on, and then Fast Bang Pooper Doop. But for Pooper Doop, he never wrote parts to it because it was like a lot of it was written when he wasn't here, and he might have written a couple things that we didn't get used. I don't remember. But that was like he wrote a couple harmonies that didn't wind up getting used, whereas Tell Them I'm Sorry, it was like, okay, we took like serious ideas that we developed with him.
Now, Ray, how do you pronounce Ray's last name? Suhi? Sui.
Sui. Okay. Now, for anyone out there,
I think.
so that's what I mean. You know, I phonetically it's like Suhi, I guess. Ray is currently in 6 Feet Under and Cannabis Corpse, and he's also involved in some crazy like jazzy sort of stuff too.
He because he when he's home he teaches lessons at a place with a bunch of other. So I feel like a lot of his projects are like musicians that he works with. At that place, or musicians he's met for that place. So he's always just like putting together jazz groups and shit like that. Yeah, so, and then he has like his solo shred projects. Yeah. He's got that more like electronic thing with what's that called?
I don't think I know.
With Steve Hanashowski?
I don't know.
Okay, well he has. It starts with a G. I forget how it's pronounced though.
So anyone out there that plays guitar is listening to this. Look up Ray Sui. Suhy.
Yes.
Right. Incredible guitar player. Peripherally involved in this record by East of the Wall. That'll be accurate, right? Peripherally involved. Okay, great. So is this why it took 2 years to make this album? All this?
I don't. No, I'm going to say no. I think there are a lot of factors, and a lot of it is maybe why we've had lineup changes and so much change over the years. But this is not. It's not a day job for us.
Of course.
And so I think we all sort of, make sacrifices in our life for this, make sacrifices in this for our lives. And I think that a lot of the times those two sets of sacrifices don't jive. And that's where, lineup changes end up happening.
Yeah.
In the last few years, so I have 3 kids now, 2 of which have been over the last 2 or 3 years. So that is a big part of it. I've really tried to not step away completely when I'm having babies, but it's tough.
Yeah, it's the demands of everyday life and family and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
As Chris mentioned, so his wife has been going to school on a tropical island.
Tropical island?
St. Kitts.
Where do you study? What kind of material would you study out on a tropical island like that?
It's veterinary school.
Oh,
yeah. So there's only so many veterinary schools. It's the one she got into was in St. Kitts. So yeah, that's been rough. That's been a little over 2 years that she's been there, and she'll come home for a few weeks every 4 months, and every 4 months I'll go down there for like a week or two. So it's like 2 months. We'll go 2 or so months, and then she'll be up here, and then a couple months later I'll go down there, and then we crisscross. So she's finally going to be back in the States, and we've had a lot of stuff going on. Well, I mean, I think that the reason this album took a little longer was 2 different, probably related things. One, we just took longer writing it. We started it like right when Redaction Artifacts was complete, which was. The album came out 2013. So I think by then we already started writing Clapping on the Ones and Threes, and then we finished writing the record in spring of 2017. But then we finished recording it a year later, and then mixing and then mastering, and then vinyl takes like 8 years to come out because the record pressing plants are backed up so long. So. But I think that compositionally it took a little bit longer, and I think some of that was some lineup change stuff. We wound up retooling a bunch of things, planning some things.
But we also write very complicated songs.
You do.
Just take a long
I can
time.
vouch for that for sure, man.
We were talking about we basically ditched like a half a song halfway through the writing process because it just it wasn't really it wasn't what we felt it needed to be, and so that sets you back like. That's a few months right there that are deleted from your band life.
And that wasn't the only thing that we ditched.
What else did we ditch? Remind me.
I don't think there were any full things like that. There were definitely like a riff or two from each song that I'm sure we did. I know that Clapping had a few things that we got rid of. I've got recordings of like riffs. You'll be surprised. I can pull up some rehearsal sessions and it's like, oh, that. There's 1 or 2 I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm not going to hum them because it'll sound completely ridiculous.
As far as recording goes, you guys seem to be like a hands-on sort of outfit here. Now, do you also...
We all play with hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
literally a hands-on outfit.
Yeah.
So do you also involve yourselves, intimately with the recording process? Do you do any of that yourself, or do you do it all in a different studio, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, so we recorded almost the whole thing ourselves. We did the drums at a studio called Portrait Recording Studios, where we've been there a bunch now. They just have a really fantastic sounding drum room. I feel like if you're going to record on your own, there's a lot you can get away with in like a bedroom or an untreated space or this rehearsal room. But the one thing you can't fake still is a good drum room.
Absolutely.
And I would rather have a good drummer in a good sounding room with really mediocre gear than all the fanciest preamps and microphones in a just like a room with carpet and drywall. I mean, well, Portrait also has good sounding gear, but that's the point. So yeah, we did the drums there, but then everything else was done at my house. I had the amp for distorted guitars mic'd up for 4 months. And every time my cats walked past the microphone, I gave them a dirty look, and I was like, "You better not move that goddamn microphone."
We should mention he turned his bedroom into the amp room while his wife was not living in the States at the moment. So.
Yeah, so I sleep with the amps, but yeah. So well, the bass was actually trapped at our rehearsal room. It was trapped in our rehearsal room because. I'm in a 2-story house, and there's just no way to control the volume of a bass amp. So I just cranked both of those Ampeg 810s at one time and just kind of went, one was clean and one was distorted. But yeah, for the distorted guitars, we recorded them at a surprisingly quiet volume. I have this thing called a Fryette, which used to be VHT. I know they're called Fryette. Power station. It's like a load box.
Yeah, it's like a brake, puts an artificial load on the head, so it gives the illusion of,
Right.
you're pushing at the same sort of power output, but it's a resistance that's actually absorbing instead of a cabinet, right?
Right, but it works different than other attenuators because most other attenuators just put resistance there, but then it's still the one power amp driving it, just with more resistance, so it works harder. Mm-hmm. This actually works a little differently. It's more like the kind of load box that you would get in like a cab sim, where it absorbs 100% of the load of the head,
okay,
converts it to line level, then sends it through a lower wattage second power amp. So yeah, the whole amp is just like brought down to line level and then reamped. With like a 50-watt power section instead of 100. So yeah, you can get the head like cranked and then mic it up again. I mean, it has some tone trade-offs because you're going through a different power. You're still using your original power amp, but then you're using this other separate power amp. But overall, the main amplifier on the record was a Mesa Boogie Royal Atlantic for all the distortion tones, and that has an attenuator. But we shot it out. We were like, all right, let's try just the amp straight to the cab with the built-in attenuator, and then we shot it out no attenuator and just using the Fryette to reamp it with a lower wattage, and that won the shootout. It just was clearer and brighter. It didn't lose as much high end.
And that shootout itself took weeks because you rent studio for a couple weeks or whatever, and you get that done in 3 or 4 hours or half a day or whatever. But when you're using your rehearsal time for that, evenings, nights, whatever, shooting stuff out, just that's what you've accomplished for a week or two, and then you're ready to record guitars.
Yeah, I mean, so it had pros and that whole process had pros and cons. I think ultimately we wound up with maybe a better product because I think a lot of our records, we've worked with some really talented recording engineers and mixing engineers, but there's a lot of shit going on, and sometimes no matter how good you are, if you don't have hindsight, you don't realize what it needed. So I mean, there was some stuff where we sat on it for like a week, and we're like, actually, I think this tone sounds. So yeah, like the chord distortion tone was originally just the Royal Atlantic, and then we realized it was lacking some mid-range. So we brought in. Matt also has a Mesa Boogie 525. So it's a Mark V, but it's like the 25-watt version. So and the power tubes in there are like Vox style power tubes, so more mid-rangey. And we brought that in on a lower gain setting and just blended in like 20% of the tone, and that gave us the mid-range that we needed. So all that, and we didn't realize that until like a week and a half in. So that's
seeing like little details like that. That's like when you're on like the clock, basically, when you enter a studio scenario, you can't really go into that deep of experimentation. And that's so this whole thing is very a positive way of recording then.
Except for the fact that it takes forever. But besides that, yeah, it's like if there's some way we could get the benefit of the hindsight while still condensing the process for the next recording, that's going to be kind of the goal, is like, hey, how can we get all the benefits of this but not spend a year recording it?
So how does that work with Translation Lost when they want like a record from you? Do they like, all right, in the next 12 to 14 months, we'd like to have an album to put out by you guys?
Well, thankfully, I don't think they're waiting on hit singles from us. You know what? I don't even know.
Yeah. So basically, yeah. I mean, one, like they knew that we're like we're not like touring like we used to be, and that we were going to deliver them a record eventually, and basically Drew from Translation Lost just every like 8 months. Hey man, what's up? I hear you're working on a record. Any how's that going? Hey man, so you got a record? And eventually, and then even when I told him, hey, we're in the middle of recording it, he was like, all right, so you got a record? And then it was like a year later, no, still recording it. Okay, no, it's all recorded now. We're just waiting for it to be mixed. And so even so Scott Evans was our mixing engineer on it. He plays guitar in the band Kowloon Walled City, and he has a place called Annie Sleep out in Oakland, and this isn't his core day job either. Like he does all that shit like his labor of love after hours and on weekends, and but he's also really good, so he's really backed up. So
exactly,
yeah. You send him a record, and you're waiting 3 months before he can even get around to it. But I was really psyched that we sent it to him because we thought that the mixes that I had, like the working mixes, were good. And then we got Scott's mixes back, and we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, we've worked, like Chris said, we've worked with some really talented engineers in the past. Scott, he took this, I think he took it personally. It was like, I think he was trying to get as much juice out of this recording as we were. And I'd see his notes back to us, and I'd see his notes to Brad, the mastering engineer, who also did an awesome job. And I'm like, wow, these guys are like, they are working for us. They want to work, not for us, for this project. They want this to sound as awesome as possible. And that was really, really great.
Yeah. So now that it's all done, are you happy with the way the recording turned out?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that period where you think like, oh, this is our best one and our best, it's the best songs, the best recording. We've had this for a while now, and I still feel, the band has covered so much ground that I definitely feel like of the records I've been on, I wasn't on Farmer's Almanac, which was our first record, but for the other three after that, and then this one. I definitely am happiest with this one. It's there's nothing that I'm going back afterwards and going like, shit. Like if we just would have realized this at the time, I would have, a couple little minor things, but overall, this is the first one where I'm like, okay, this is a thing I'm really happy to present to people.
Hands down. Even now, we've mixed this thing months ago. I still get chills listening to certain parts of it. I think it's by far
well, you had that fever for a while.
That's true. I think it is the best sounding and just best executed collection of music that we've put out.
Now, the other question I have is because you guys play pretty technical music, and do you get so dialed in and focused about performances that sometimes you end up really obsessing over certain lines, and that becomes this kind of showstopper in the recording process?
I don't think so. I think we're able to actually roll with that somewhat. If I'm and I do this a lot on my own projects that when I record at home, if I am really unable to get something and I've I put the time into making it what I think I want it to be, I'll find another way to execute. I don't think that there's this untouchable, perfect, unassailable ideal riff that has to be played this way. if I can get it to that, I will do what I can to get it there. But I think I could probably also find another way to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish also. So we do roll with it, and I think like we'll adjust things if we're like, why are we trying to get this down when this also could be really cool instead if we do it this way, and probably a lot easier too, especially when we're thinking about vocals. I don't sing live at all because I'm terrible at singing and playing at the same time. It's just not something I ever focused on.
It's a hard thing to do, definitely.
Yeah, it's really hard, and you have to put the time into it. And I always just decided, you know what? I rather put the time that I have into the guitar alone. So I'm willing to, for myself, if I ever do vocals, I'm willing to simplify. And Greg, who does almost all of the vocals, with the exception of Chris's screams, we're usually trying to find ways to make sure that what he's playing, he can sing live, because a lot of the stuff is just like you're playing on totally different beats from where the vocals fall. The melody lines are going in different directions. There's
The tonic isn't in the chord that you're playing.
it's hard. So that's not rule one. It's not the first thing on the agenda, but if we need to work through that, we will, to make sure that we can actually execute live what we're doing.
I think also too with us, it's funny when Matt was learning these songs, the other Matt that just joined the band, or when when we've done some tours and had like some fill-in guitar players. It's funny because because like the music has some odd time signatures or whatever, they assume that, oh, this is going to be technical stuff. This is probably hard to play. And then they start learning the songs, and it's like almost nothing on this record is really that hard. I mean, it's hard for me to play sometimes because I'm not a shredder or anything. But whenever anyone else has been learning these songs, and they're like, "Oh, this part's really tricky," I was like, that's because you're not playing it in the this way. Try like making this an open note and then this here and pull off to this. And they're like, oh. Like, it's weird. Because we play quote unquote prog rock because we've got some odd time signatures, or like some of our stuff's like kind of atonal here and there. We've kind of gotten lumped in with bands that are much more technical than us and can play like way more intricate things than us. And we've always I've always thought of progressive rock not as hard music, but as adventurous music and experimental music. And that's always, and maybe that gets to like the whole, to bring things full circle, maybe that gets back to the whole King Crimson Red versus Discipline thing, is really from day one of this band, or the like original band that Matt and I formed that this came out of. The idea wasn't to play challenging music. The idea was to play music that didn't sound like other things, or like kept my short attention span like interested, or just like not get bored ever, never get bored.
I would like to caveat that with when we say we are maybe not as good as it seems. I think Seth is. He just like he can play things that other people just can't.
Well, that's the guy who has to be good, is the drummer, man.
Yeah.
Like I know I always try to make myself appear better by having great drummers in the band, so I can relate.
You can get away with like as if you have a really good drummer. That's I would rather hear everyone else be mediocre and the drummer be amazing than vice versa.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think Ray, when he was in for a few years, and releasing Redaction Artifacts with him on it, that also I think bolstered that sort of image as of more progressive, because I mean he can play. That guy can play anything you put in front of him, forward, backward, upside down, and he displayed a lot of that on Redaction Artifacts as well. If maybe I'm giving away a secret here, but if you listen to the new record to NP Complete, and then compare it to Redaction Artifacts, you're not going to find solos and leads and crazy arpeggios like you did on Redaction Artifacts, and that's because Ray's not there. I can't do that stuff, but I know what I can do, and I try and capitalize on it really to make it shine as much as I can.
Do you guys like horror movies at all?
Not me. I had to leave the Care Bear movies when I was a kid because I was too scared. So not me.
If I'm with a bunch of people, I like a good like B horror movie for the fun of it. And on my own, like I usually am not that into them, but when you have one that is like out there and really does something different, so like people have been recommending like Hereditary.
Oh yeah,
I was like, okay, like that
Good
seems like the kind of movie I'd be into.
Right. Well, the reason I bring that up is we were talking about Crimson, right? There's a movie called Mandy, which is a horror action crazy movie by a director named Panos Cosmatos, who did another film called Beyond the Black Rainbow, which is a out there film.
Yeah, both of those I've been meaning to check out for a while.
Oh man, you'll be pleasantly surprised in the beginning of Mandy, because Starless by King Crimson is the sort of title sequence song, and it's a perfect. As soon as like I was already predisposed to like the movie, but when I heard the beginning of that song, I was like, oh my god, they're using this one of my favorite King Crimson songs, and then the rest of the film sort of has the same sort of vibe as the entire Red album, which is kind of cool. And also, there's like a red tinge to the whole movie. So I want to talk to the director and be like, hey, do you like King? Well, obviously you like them, but what's the deal? How come everything looks red? And you have the song from Red. You know.
You're kind of selling me on it a little bit, but I do want to I want to mention that there was an evil Care Bear in that movie, so it was kind of scary. But
you're giving a lot of disclaimers to stuff. I just want to let you know.
It's part of my day job, but
I wouldn't say that Mandy wasn't very horrific. It was there's some violence in it, but it wasn't necessary. It was more of an action film in some ways. It's like an action revenge movie.
I got to tell you, I think I saw it like on a movie marquee, and I assumed automatically that it was like a Mandy Moore movie or something. I had heard nothing, and I was like, oh, that's got to be it. Probably.
I just usually avoid movies with Nicolas Cage in it.
Well, all right. In the last decade or so, yeah, but he was in some great movies which I enjoyed. He was in Leaving Las Vegas, which I thought was amazing. He was in George Lynch's it's David Lynch's Wild at Heart. He was great in that, but generally he isn't in very good movies. Yeah. I agree.
It's for whatever reason, like I just really dislike Nicolas Cage, his acting. Like even like Adaptation is the one movie by that screenwriter whose name I'm blanking on. That just something about putting Nicolas Cage in a movie makes me tend to not like it.
If you want to really hate Nicolas Cage, you should check out the Werner Herzog remake or interpretation of Bad Lieutenant. It's called Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. Features Nicolas Cage as the main character in that, and you'll see what levels of despair like he must have sunk to make that film.
All right, I will put that on the list.
So, do you have any plans of like a release show or anything like that when this record comes out?
Yeah, we're doing. Well, we got a warm up show coming up in Jersey in late February at Brighton Bar, and then which is Wednesday, February 27th. That's with Disparager and Zvi, which is Ron from KO.Band. And then we have two shows, hopefully, for the record release. One is April 13th. Does this podcast go up after Wednesday, I'm assuming?
It might.
Yeah, okay.
We don't know. We could.
Okay.
I can. It's whatever you want, man.
All right.
It's January right now.
Yeah. The April 13th at Kingsland is going to be in Brooklyn is going to be our New York record release show, and that's with Disparager and Marching Teeth, and I think one more band, and then we're working on a New Jersey record release show for that Sunday, probably Central Jersey, like Asbury area, hopefully with like hundreds of AU, and
is that how you pronounce it?
I think they call it hundreds of AU or hundreds of AW, but it's like astronomical units or something. Oh. Yeah, it's like a sci-fi thing. And maybe Lowlight is playing that too, and maybe someone else.
Right on. Well, thanks for taking time out and talking to us, and I look forward to checking you guys out when you guys play in Brooklyn at that Kingsland show.
Thank you for having us.
Of course, man.
Our pleasure.
I would also like to thank you for having us.
Yeah.
More than him.
All right, so you mentioned the new Star Trek series.
Yes, I did.
Have you watched the new Voltron series?
I was unaware of that.
It is, I finished this. They just released the last season 8.
Okay, season 8.
Yeah, they did 8 seasons of it, and I just finished it last week, and I don't feel the need to watch any more TV.
Okay.
Like it has fulfilled me.
Interesting. I was like in a big Narcos thing for a while. You know, I enjoyed that, and I'm slogging my way through Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. I know, right?
Is that a remake or the original?
Well, it's on Netflix. It's a Netflix original
Okay.
that's like basically geared towards 18 to say 25-year-old girls. But me being the horror nerd that I am, I feel like I have to check it out. Anything that has to do with the occult or like Satan or witchcraft, I'm always in that.
Didn't the Church of Satan actually sue them because the statue of Baphomet that they had there was like exactly the one from the church?
Yeah, you know what's interesting about the Church of Satan's or the Temple of Satan's? There's a distinction because the Church of Satan is Anton LaVey and the Temple is this organization. It's a more modern organization. Mm-hmm. I found it interesting that their version of Baphomet doesn't have the boobs like the original one.
Huh.
And it's not really like Baphomet's not really a satanic symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's Eliphas Levi. He's like a Hebrew cleric from like thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He came up with that image, and it was to do with the universal balance, hence male and female attributes to Baphomet. It had nothing to do with Satan. Okay, now. The Temple of Satan's version of Baphomet is like a very male thing. It's a very, sort of male patriarch. I have to cut this out. It's a very male patriarchal image. So I found that interesting because their whole shtick is like about, this kind of progressive thoughts and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I wonder if they were just like market testing it, and they were just like, yeah, we're getting negative reactions from the boobs on it. We've got to like go more traditional. With
it's funny. The rock band that I'm playing, we've played two functions that the Temple of Satan have sponsored, and they're pretty amusing actually.
Did any of them have boobs?
Oh, there's plenty of boobs there, definitely.
Okay. But you should just write them a letter, just being like, like, bring it back, man. We want the original Baphomet. We want Baphomet Classic.
Yeah. There you go. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Metal Matters, a Gimme Radio podcast. We'll be back next week, so be sure to subscribe and never miss out. Also, be sure to check out Gimme Radio via web, iOS, or Android for one of the best metal communities in the world, exclusive interviews and merch, and so much more.
Yeah. If I had to pick a Star Trek, I would probably Deep Space Nine. But I mean, it's kind of you kind of had to be there at the time, which I half was. A lot of it is kind of bad. Even the ones that are good are like you have to skip every other episode.
Because I just now actually discovered that there was an existing, like a new Star Trek. It's already on season 2, I think.
Yeah, because you can't. It's behind a paywall of a CBS broadcasting show, not show, program.
So you have to have like an app or something like that to watch it. Okay.
So the only reason I was able to see it was because that's only how it works in the U.S. But my wife is in St. Kitts right now at vet school, and I was down there. And then internationally, like all kinds of shit is on Netflix outside the U.S. Like Better Call Saul is just like it premieres on Netflix. Like,
Oh,
so
really?
if you're out of the country, you can watch season